really early episode of Let's Talk Bitcoin, we spoke with Daryl, who was a customer at Bitfloor. He shared with us his experience going through some rough times there and how he had some money tied up in it. He's not the only situation where that's happened. There's a company that was around some time back called InstaWallet. It was one of the online wallet services. And here we are, a fair amount of time after some bad things happened there and some people are still trying to get their money back. This morning, I'm joined by James. James, can you tell us what happened with InstaWallet?
From what we were told when we finally found out there was a problem was the website went offline. There was like a front page warning just saying simply, there's a problem, there's some funds have been taken. Please wait. This was over Easter weekend, I think. So this was April the 1st. And obviously, everyone who had money in there, it was a pretty difficult to know what was going on and a worrying time for everyone, I think. After that, there was a few days wait before there was any updates. And then the update was that the money had been stolen. Somehow their systems had been compromised. And again, more of a kind of wait and see what's going to happen. Eventually, they put out a claims process. They said there'll be a claims process which will take 90 days. So that was probably about 8, 9, 10 days after the whole thing had happened. And I mean, that was one of the worst weeks of my life. Yeah, for some financial reasons, yeah.
So let's back up for a second. Can you tell me what is InstaWallet and why is it a service that you were using at the time?
Well, I got into Bitcoin, I suppose, 2012. The price of Bitcoins were about £3 each, and I had a few. I'd read about Bitcoin and thought I want to buy some, and I bought some, and I made a pretty serious investment, I suppose, at the time. But basically, it was the first thing that I kind of found as a way of keeping hold of Bitcoins. And obviously looking back now in hindsight, I realized that it was the wrong thing to keep that many Bitcoins in. For example, I had one wallet with 200 Bitcoins in, but I actually lost that wallet. The way that the InstaWallet works was every time you go to instawallet.org, it regenerated a unique wallet URL. So it would have like a 25, 30 digit random character thing after instawallet.org / all these random characters, and that was your private wallet address. And I believed, as it said, was that if you don't lose that address, then your money is safe. If you do lose it, there is nothing they can do. That was the warning on the site. There was, if you lose this URL, there is nothing you can do. So at the time, I lost this wallet with 200 Bitcoins in, which at the time was about 600 quid. And obviously, I was gutted, but not quite as gutted as I was when I saw the price kept going up and up and up.
Yeah, wow, that's terrible. So now this happened earlier this year, right?
It was April the 1st, over the Easter weekend, that the compromise happened. The forums obviously were on fire. There was a lot of people, a lot of angry people as well. There didn't seem to be much communication from InstaWallet, and there was a lot of people shouting scams and, suggesting that they'd run off with the money. It was an inside job. I mean, nobody really knew anything. That was the thing. I mean, it was all just hearsay. It was all just speculation. But obviously there'd been other problems with various companies that people kind of latched onto, and there was a point when I thought that there was no chance I was going to get any of my money back. I really, and it was a substantial amount, and it was, like I say, it was a tough time.
We're months after that's happened. You said that they gave a 90-day window where payouts were going to happen. It sounds like that didn't occur. Can you bring us up to date on where we are now?
Well, what they did, I think it was on the 11th of April, they said this is the way it's going to work. They're going to start a claims process. This is going to be a 90-day claims process. And in that time, you're going to be able to visit your URL. So you go back to your private URL, and it will show you how many Bitcoins you had in there. You then put your details. You basically say that this is my wallet address. This is what I want the money to be sent to. And you basically claim for that money. What they said was that if there was a duplicate claim, they would have to work out who it's going to be, because if there was a hacker who had access to all the private URLs, that I think they were expecting some duplicate claims to come in. Now, what they said was anything under 50 Bitcoins in a wallet would be paid back, no problem. If there was duplicate claims, that I think the first person to claim would be the one that got the wallet. Anything over 50 would be dealt with on a case-by-case and best efforts basis. Now, that was the thing that worried everyone. And I think for me personally, because most of my wallets were larger than 50, it was like, well, that doesn't seem very fair. If you've lost money, if say you've lost 50% of everyone's money, surely everybody should take a 50% hit, right, rather than paying out the smaller ones and then the big ones have to suffer. But now, so now the situation is that it's reached the end of that claim process. There was a bit of a problem on July the 1st, because they put that July the 1st was the end, but then it got to July the 1st, and they were like, actually, we did say 90 days, and that was on the April the 11th, 11 days after the actual hack. So we waited another 11 days, and then since then, what's happened is they said, okay, go back into your wallets. The amount that you'll be getting paid is there. Confirm that amount. So if you're signing off that amount, last kind of check, I suppose, last time to make sure there's no mistakes. And then the money will be paid out on Friday. Is it the 19th, tomorrow, Friday the 19th? And that's apparently the day that we're going to get our money back. And I mean, fortunately, so far, all the big wallets as well, all the ones over 50, they've also agreed to pay those back. I've got a couple of different wallets that have got other issues, which they're working on, I believe, but all the ones that had just had no issues, I didn't have any duplicate claims. It all went through fine. And it looks like, fingers crossed, tomorrow's the day when they'll return the money.
That sounds like, all things considered, this is not a tremendously bad outcome. So what have you taken away from this experience? What's been what have you learned from this ordeal that you've undertaken? Do you think there's an inherent problem here with any of these technologies, or is it just a site that got unlucky?
I'm not technologically minded that much, but I realise that InstaWallet must have a place. And from what I understand, talking to some of the developers and the guys behind it, they are planning on relaunching it in another way. Like blockchain.info, which I use sometimes for small amounts. It does have a place in the economy, I would have thought, but everything I have is now a paper wallet, and I've just ordered from Andreas a pack of paper wallets as well to go, because they look so interesting. But I think that's got to be the way. If you've got any substantial amount of money, it's got to be kept in cold storage. It's got to be trusting it with an online wallet. I mean, it's not the developers, and if not, even if you inherently trust everybody that's on there, you've got the risk of hacking. You've got all the problems. Looking back now as well, I mean, the guys behind InstaWallet, the way they've done it, even though they were getting shouted down so much at the start, I think that someone else was mentioned on the forum just recently as well. If they do pay everything back, then really, when you look back at the process they've had to deal with, which is possibly handing out millions of pounds back to people who pretty much anonymous all over the world, 90 days really was not too bad, to be honest, to do that, make sure there's no mistakes. Because obviously, if they give the Bitcoins back to the wrong person, then there's going to be serious trouble because obviously it's irreversible. So they've got to make sure that what they do is done right. All credit to them. Other than maybe slight lacks of communication sometimes at certain points of the process where maybe a little bit more, customer-friendly communication would have been appreciated at the time, I don't think really you can fault them. If the money comes back, they'll have done a very good job.
Thank you for sharing this with us, James. I think that this is, these stories are interesting when they come out, and they're painful, certainly, for the people who are involved. But I really think that there are lessons to be learned to share in the experience with other people in the community so that they can be more skeptical moving forward and at least have some of this experience, under their belt too.
For sure. I mean, the one more thing I wanted to say that you mentioned it in one of the more recent episodes that I listened to, and that's just there needs to be something for the beginner, something for the beginner, which is still easy for them to get into, but still secure. Because when you first look into it, Bitcoin.qt is still quite complicated. And I'm sure there are teams working on it to make that whole thing more customer friendly, more client friendly, and just having the security level locked in right at the start, because the online wallets do just seem to be the easiest way to kind of get someone involved in Bitcoin first of all. And that's obviously what we want to do. We want to grow the community and get everyone involved.
That's the hope here, is that regardless of how we get there, these problems get fixed, and that companies emerge and that products emerge that actually fix these problems and make it so it can just be an easy thing while still not sacrificing that security, like you mentioned. I think that is absolutely what needs to happen, and it will happen eventually, and it's situations like this that'll cause it.
Lovely.
James, thank you very much for your time today. I really appreciate you coming on the show to share your experience.
No problem at all, and keep up the good work, yeah?
I really appreciate James speaking to me about his experience with InstaWallet. We recorded that right before they were set to pay out. I know that you had some accounts with InstaWallet too. How did that go? Were you able to get your money out?
Yeah, I had one InstaWallet, and at the time when they experienced the hack, I only had about 0.125 Bitcoins in there, so it wasn't very much. But I filed a claim to try to get it back in April, and they said that they would start processing the refunds, I think, in July. I didn't know this, but I thought I was all set because I had made the claim. I had said, how much was in this wallet and would like it back and please pay it out to this address. Well, what I didn't know was that you actually had to revisit the wallet URL page. It would just be the same page that you had your wallet on when InstaWallet was operating. You had to revisit it, and then you had to approve the payout. And once you said, yes, I want this payout, then they would actually pay you. And they did, a couple days later after I did that. But the thing that I didn't know was you actually had to go back to that URL after the claim was filed and say, yes, I still want it. So, they've made it a little bit tricky, but you can apparently still get your money back if you know to do that. So just a PSA.
Now, one thing that I didn't ask him, and I'm curious if you know, do you know where this money's coming from? Because if they were hacked and the money was supposedly taken, I mean, are the people who ran InstaWallet actually paying this out of pocket, or did they get the money back?
I don't know where it came from. I don't care. I got my money back, so
Fair enough.
I'll take it wherever it came from. But yeah, I don't think they got it back, because I think we would have heard about that, right? If there was a high profile kind of theft that got solved. I didn't even hear anything about any sort of forensic work that was done to determine where the money went. Did you guys hear anything about that?
No, I didn't. And that's kind of what's interesting about this whole thing is that it seems like, for the people who were affected by it, this was a big deal. But for the people who weren't affected by it, there really wasn't too much to it. And, again, it's sort of surprising to see that when these thefts happen, people aren't broadcasting the addresses that they went to all over the place. It seems like that would kind of be the standard practice.
In the olden days of Bitcoin back in 2011, when the high profile hacks would happen, like I think TradeHill, there were posts all over the internet saying, okay, it went to this address and this address and this address, and then from there to these addresses. It was like, okay, if you ever see these addresses again, let us know. It was publicizing it, but I didn't see any of that with this InstaWallet.
I think there's a big risk in trying to implement safety recourses and solutions to these types of thefts, because there's an instinctive need to do something about it, right? To make sure this can't happen. And that instinctive need for safety leads to poor security decisions, and I think decisions that may be poor for the long-term success and survivability of Bitcoin. So we already saw some of the knee-jerk reactions that regulators have imposed with the idea of putting delays, right? So you can recover the money after a while. That would help solve a lot of fraud problems in Bitcoin, but it would break a very important underlying principle. I think similarly, tracking coins and tracking addresses and then putting in place potentially filters to say don't spend money from these coins creates an extremely dangerous precedent that breaks Bitcoin neutrality and then opens that technology up, the potential technology of filtering by address or tracking addresses or scoring addresses, etc. That power will be used, and it won't be used to protect against theft. I can guarantee you that.
So your concern is that this is a slippery slope, and that even because we're not talking about setting up systems here. We're talking about the fact that if there's a theft and you know where the money goes, then it makes sense to say, hey, the money went here. So your concern is that by even going down that path at all, you inevitably wind up with a situation where you can continue justifying continued action in that way until you have systems set up where essentially you're checking every transaction that goes through an exchange or various other checkpoints and that's the point, is that you have checkpoints now where you're actually looking for these specific addresses that are, identified as bad actors for whatever reason.
Yeah, and you go from actors who are bad towards the Bitcoin community to actors who are bad towards the center of power to actors who are dissidents towards the center of power to banning WikiLeaks, in 5 easy steps. And you're right back to Visa not accepting payments for WikiLeaks, and you end up with a situation where Bitcoin payments to WikiLeaks can be blocked because once you put that control point to the network, someone will regulate it, legislate it, and then use it for their own power accumulation.
So, well, then what do you do in the case of a theft? What is the correct way that doesn't endanger the entire network over the long term? Is just to say, okay, well, you got it, so bye. Thanks for playing.
Maybe prevention is the only real solution.
Yeah, prevention and punishment. There's nothing that says you can't go after, and if you manage to discover who these people are, claw it back, just like we saw with Pirates at 40, right? In that case, the identity was a bit more obvious. So I'm not saying don't enforce. I think, Stephanie, you're absolutely right. Prevention, the idea that you have caveat emptor turned on all times, that this is a fundamentally different currency where there is no nanny state to come and save you if you mess up with your money and you make bad choices. I think that's a healthy attitude. The risk of losing your money if you do business with people who don't take security seriously enough is a good thing. And if you remove that risk by implementing things in the protocol, what you end up is with rules and regulations that protect incumbents, not you.
So we have a set of proposed, quote, improvements to the Bitcoin protocol coming up over the next, 6 months, some of which do things like this, some of which do kind of start down that path, that slippery slope, moving towards more control and more ability to filter between different types of users, basically, ones that are okay versus ones that aren't. We definitely should talk about that on a future show. I mean, do you think that if we did go down that path, what do you think the community response would be? You know, I mean, do you think that this would be something that would be viewed broadly as a good thing? Or do you think that people would recognize that it, in fact, has all of these negative repercussions once you play out the logic long enough?
No, I think people would be pretty skeptical of it and would probably quickly make the connection like Andreas did of, hey, you know, if we can color or taint certain coins, then perhaps that could be used in ways that aren't very conducive to freedom and frankly aren't really Bitcoin, you know, and undermine this very fundamental principle. One thing that has not been mentioned so far in this discussion is the idea of insurance, which I think would be really interesting. And, you know, perhaps there is some kind of Bitcoin insurance against hacks and so forth, but I'm not aware of it. I was just thinking, you know, if Mt. Gox, if InstaWallet, and I'm sure Mt. Gox might have a pretty high premium because they get a lot of trouble. You know, if some of these organizations had insurance that said, okay, you know, we'll pay this many Bitcoins per month if you insure us against some disaster where there's a major hack and all of our Bitcoins are stolen. And then in turn, the insurance company would sort of have the effect of really checking into the security measures that were being taken by the company that they're insuring to prevent theft. And so they would have an incentive to have strong anti-theft measures and have better security on their back end or whatever for a lower premium. Then I think that would help solve a lot of problems. That would be a great preventative measure. But I don't know if anything like that exists. Maybe there's a market opportunity for that.
There certainly is insurance against hacking. It's something that's developed over the last decade. It started off with Lloyd's of London, which is a well-known insurance company that offers kind of creative insurance schemes that haven't been done before, and gradually spread. And at the moment, there's 2 or 3 providers here in the US, at least, mostly reinsurance companies. They have a name that ends in re. Those companies tend to offer hacking insurance for specific premiums. So yeah, I think that's a really good market-based solution for this problem. However, I don't share your confidence that people will extrapolate these small control interactions and this, we could all be a bit safer if we gave up a tiny bit of liberty here to gain more security in the Bitcoin protocol. Unfortunately, I've seen that equation play out in real life too many times, and almost always people go for the safety instead of the freedom, and they don't really see the long-term implications of making protocol changes like this.
But even if it's the Bitcoin community where they're naturally right now, the early adopters are like really skeptical, kind of libertarian-ish, you don't think that they would be a different kind of crowd?
I hope so. And that's really the big danger, I think, of mainstream adoption, is that as you have mainstream adoption, you erode the principles that got us here in the first place, and you start going down a different path, which is why you need these principles very well baked in advance. I'm worried that some of these changes will go through with not too much discussion, but more importantly, I'm worried about the vote. Because at the end of the day, if the client, the Satoshi reference client 09, has an NSA backdoor in it, or whatever, just to go to the completely extreme situation, just for fun, then essentially people would end up voting by choosing whether they would run the 0.83 or the 0.9 client and cause a hard fork, and then pick the blockchain that represents their ideology. Now, that's what would happen if mining was distributed among all the users of Bitcoin. But in this particular case, that decision will be made almost entirely by those who have ASIC miners. And so you're essentially concentrating the consensus decision in the hands of people who have different incentives from the average Bitcoin user, which is why I think this is dangerous.
Do you think that there could be a situation where you have a fork and they don't resolve? You have one fork go one way with part of the network and another fork go another way with part of the network, never again to meet, you know, with slightly different rules in each one?
That's certainly possible. I don't see why not. Just to explain to our audience, you would then have Bitcoin in both chains. And essentially the value of that Bitcoin would diverge, especially if there was limited trading between them. And over time, one would become dominant over the other. Who knows which one? Just like a software fork, this would result in fragmentation of the space and would probably be damaging to the network effect and overall growth of the platform. But if you have a very controversial feature choice, then that's exactly what should happen. That's the design of the Bitcoin network, is to do exactly that, to break down the consensus line and, if necessary, fork into two different networks. You see, the thing is, it's a very, very difficult proposition to do that because there is an enormous amount of inertia and network effect behind Bitcoin as is today. So essentially, if you are part of the core dev team, you can change the core Bitcoin network and use that inertia, making sure that people will follow you over that change. But if you're not part of the core dev team and you disagree with those changes, overcoming them is much, much more difficult because you don't have the network effect on your side.
Changes to the Satoshi client, I don't always update immediately. It seems like that, there's some momentum on the side.
But you're not a miner. And that's the bottom line. So whether you upgrade or not, nobody cares because you don't have the hashing power. You're not part of the voting population.
This is a good point.
I mean, that's the main point. That unless you have hashing power and significant amounts of hashing power, you have no vote. Who cares if you upgrade or not? Code will be run based on the rules of whatever code the miners are running, not whatever code the clients are running.
If I showed you a website where you could easily purchase electronics from the world's largest distributor with Bitcoins at 0% markup, would you think it was too good to be true? Good news, it's real, and it's at bitcoinstore.com. Choose from 500,000 items, save money over Amazon and Newegg, and convert your Bitcoins to real-world items. You can even buy with privacy. All they need is a shipping address. But don't take my word for it. See for yourself at bitcoinstore.com.